Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
Guess what I just finished doing? And why my hair is wet.
Oh, you took a shower?
Well, that was a big deal. I did take a shower. Thanks for noticing. I ran, which I usually do on Tuesday mornings. But after I ran, I started the first step in what is going to be a long journey. And it is related to this episode, actually.
Really?
I have a goal that I almost don't want to tell you or anyone.
You want to run a marathon?
No, I actually have zero interest in running a marathon.
Half marathon?
Nope, I've run a half marathon before. Also, don't really care. Nope. This is a bigger yet smaller goal.
Okay.
I want to be able to do pull-ups. I'm looking at your face. That's not an easy thing for me. I have zero upper body strength.
That's a great goal.
Yeah. Can you do a pull-up? Like pump out a bunch of pull-ups in a respectable way where you do it in front of other people?
What do you think?
I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay. Well, not every guy can. Like, you got to actually do pull-ups to be able to do a pull-up.
Yes, I know how and can complete multiple pull-ups.
Okay, nice. I cannot. I do know how. I cannot. I don't even think I can do one, actually. I know I just proved to myself I cannot do one. I can do like stool-assisted pull-ups.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I just called it a pull-up. A stool-assisted pull-up.
A stool up?
Stool Up, good name. Anyways, I started day one of my YouTube journey teaching me how to. Greg was kind of trying to like put me on a workout plan for it, and then I got targeted on something on Instagram, and there's this person who I'll give her credit, Summer Fun Fitness, who has like really good content about kind of how to get on a path to be able to do not just pull-ups, but some pretty cool like the thing where you like look like you're walking and. Just like very, very cool, like acrobatic shit. So I'm I cannot wait excited
for the Instagram documentation of this journey.
Well, right now there's going to be no documentation because it's so embarrassing. I was trying to even just do a few things of what she was talking about. And it was, it's baby steps.
Can we see the first step? Can you post that, please?
I guess I can post it. I'll post it the week we release this episode.
Okay, good.
On kids sports, because I basically feel like I'm a kid learning a new sport right now.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the cost of kids sports, some of the issues that other parents are having, some of the reasons behind them, and what you can do about it. But mostly just our thoughts around kids sports, which you and I have some strong opinions on them.
Like we have strong opinions on everything. But, I always knew kids' sports were expensive. I'd hear other people talk about it, but it didn't affect me. Mm-hmm. And now it's affecting me, Mike. Yeah. So we need to talk about
now
this.
It's a you problem.
It's a me problem. Yeah. I mean, it is like, I really was sort of like, oh, well, sucks for you. Or, you just can't fully relate or appreciate it. And something hit us recently where I was like, what the, how does this cost this much? Which we'll talk about later. But yeah, let's jump in.
So we did an Instagram survey and asked people how much they were spending and then also what some of their issues and concerns were. So we got a ton of responses and this was really fascinating, and I'll read through some of these, but these are not all of them. All right. So soccer, swimming, wrestling, $6,000 a year. Swimming for kids under 10, $90 per kid per month times 3 kids. And then another answer, which was about the same, swimming at $1,200 a year. A 4-year-old playing soccer, $152 for the fall, which shows like the low end of the range.
That's what I was always used to. I was used to like a few $100 here and there, and it was not even.
So it is not impossible to go find this stuff. But one of the things that I think is important to share is that like, if you are outraged by the amount of money you're spending, it is not unique to you. Everybody's going through this. All right, some more. Hockey, $5,000 per kid per year. Lacrosse at $1,000 per kid per year. Another one at ice hockey, $8,000 to $10,000 a year for a travel team. Gymnastics, $5,000. Another parent, 5 kids, public school sports only. So it's free except for a nominal charge for equipment.
I thought that was an interesting one, by the way, because I've got kids in public school sports. It's not free. It's still, I mean, maybe it is at their school, but it's not at ours. Like, it's still a few $100 of a fee for a bunch of junk.
I found an interesting article, which I'll read an excerpt from, which talks about that. And then the last one, competitive dance for $2,500, and she's only 6. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for sharing those with us. Because again, this is in the spirit of friends talking about money. I feel better. It's not like misery loves company, but it's like when you realize you're paying, some amount for health insurance or life insurance or whatever, and you're like outraged by it because you don't have a lot of experience with it. And then you find out, oh, that's actually like the going rate. That's what everyone's paying. You feel a little bit better that you're like, okay, well, it's not like I somehow chose some really expensive situation here. So I appreciate everyone sharing that because it's a little cathartic. Do you want to talk about what we spend, Mike? Like, what are you spending on kids' sports? You got
so Emma, our oldest, does gymnastics, which is $220 a month, and then like $1,000 for the year for meets and leotards and competition stuff, which is pretty expensive, but she loves it, and she gets a lot of value at it. She does gymnastics at home all the time. Like, she's doing cartwheels in the living room. She loves it. Now, luckily, she's going to be super tall, and so her days of being a gymnast are going to be short-lived. So are you
just like crossing your fingers for when she?
Yeah, I think she's going to be 5'10" when she's grown. So she's quickly outgrowing this sport. But she also does swim team with her sister, and that's like $100 a month per kid.
Per kid.
Yeah, so kind of what the 2 swimming answers we got, we're paying the same amount.
So you're paying like $400 plus a month for kids' activities. Okay.
Yeah.
So, question, when I'm not going to ask you the swimming one, because Britta's like a professional swimmer, and that's like, I can't imagine there was any question on like the value of that. When this gymnastics became $220 a month, because I would guess when she was younger, it didn't start at that cost. But like when it became that size of an ongoing cost, was there any question? Like, did you guys discuss it? Was it just like, of course she wants to do this, we'll do it, no question? It
was the latter. We just kind of assumed that we were going to be paying for activities. And it's not my first choice to pay for something that expensive, but it's also not that much more expensive than doing like the cheapest thing. I would consider swimming the cheapest activity she can do right now for $100 a month. And if she's paying $100 more and she loves it, so be it. She's not going to do it forever, like I said, because she's going to be way too tall in about a year. What about you, Maggie? What are you spending?
Well, I'm a little bit ahead of you in terms of kids' ages, and I can tell you that $220 a month. Yeah, in kid quantities, that $220 a month I think is just going to get higher over time. But we've historically, our kids, we have 3 girls. Our kids have not been like super into sports. I played a good bit of sports when I was a kid, and so did my brother. But like casually, like we played on a church basketball league, and we played for our schools, and I played on a club soccer team for a couple seasons, but we didn't spend a ton when I was a kid on this stuff. And so with our kids, we've every now and then, like, Kate's been in a basketball league that's like a few $100s, like $300 and $350 for a season of basketball, and it's at a church, but it's run by like kind of a sports program, and then we've like paid, it's like $300 per kid for the summer of swim team and stuff like that. So we're used to paying a few $100 every time a kid wants to participate in something. One of our kids just did volleyball at middle school, and it was about $300 plus some like new equipment that she didn't yet have. But the volleyball bug has gotten into our house in the last couple months. I'm even having like a blast. We bought a net for the front yard. We've literally, the kids are out there every single day. Our neighbors are coming over and playing. Like, it's been a blast. We've had a great time with it. But once she played for this middle school team, all the kids on it were like much better than her and really good. And were like playing on a club team, like they were playing on a club team, and it was one in our neighborhood that's like really close. It's literally like a half a mile away where they practice, and it's like very convenient. And so we were like, oh, this is great. And they had these like drop-in sessions. They were $40 per kid each for like an hour and a half of play. And I was like, that feels expensive, but whatever. They really wanted to go. Then they decide they want to try out for the team. And when I saw what it costs to play for the season, I was like, no way. What's going on? Like, this isn't right.
The suspense is killing me. What's the number?
It's about $2,000 per kid for a 5-ish month season.
That's a lot for a short season.
Yeah, and there's 3 kids. So, and they all want to do it. And they all just tried out this past Saturday. The tryouts alone were $55 per kid just to try out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was a 2.5 hour tryout session. So, I mean, they're, playing volleyball for 2.5 hours. And they got a shirt out of it. But it's really expensive, right? And so I was sort of, this is where I say, like, recently I've been like, kicked in the butt on, a reminder of how expensive stuff can be. And what's funny is I don't think I would have even like batted an eye back when I had a high paying job.
Yeah. Or a job.
It's now period. Where I'm just like, yeah, or a job period, perhaps. Yeah. Because that would have been a small, that would have been a portion of a paycheck and not a big deal.
So your concerns are shared by our listeners, and we got a bunch of responses here. And these were a little bit more lengthy and specific. So I've taken a selection of them, which I thought were interesting. But thank you, everybody who responded to this. So some feedback. Short season and encouraging growth at home, not mastery. Another point, I would pay for health for my kids, but the time commitment is my question. Next one, hard to balance feedback for coach between quote unquote get my money's worth and quote unquote just have fun. Paying for a boatload of semi-private swim lessons. Yes, it's a sport, but also a life-saving skill. My son is 7 and loves sports. He would play more, but it's too much money for us right now, which I don't think is an unusual position for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
This one was interesting, and I think shows a different end of the spectrum. My parents paid for club volleyball for 7 years. I played in college and still coach and play to this day. They did, however, tell me when I was in middle school that I could play club volleyball or have tennis lessons, not both.
Yeah, I like that trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
We can't afford everything, but we can afford some things.
So let's get into some of our thoughts. And I've pulled 2 excerpts from news articles, which I think are relevant and very interesting. And I will read them verbatim to you right now. First one's from the Washington Post.
Hey, let's read them together, like in sync. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Youth sports are a different game than
with
what
many.
No, this is not going to work.
You go, Mike.
Youth sports are a different game than what many adults experience as children. The 1993 movie The Sandlot depicts how things worked back in the 1960s and 70s. No tryouts, professional coaches, adult referees, or spectators. Just a bunch of kids playing ball in a sandlot until they needed to go home for dinner. Today, youth sports are a $15 billion industry in the United States and a big commitment of time and money for parents and children. The result is more pressure to perform and less fun for young athletes. And this is a quote, "Initially, the focus of youth sports was developmental, but now there is an overemphasis on competition and winning," says Eric Bean, a certified mental performance consultant and executive board member of the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. Many parents view sports as a pathway to college entrance and scholarships, even though fewer than 7% of student athletes compete beyond high school.
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And I will draw your attention to the second paragraph. That is a $15 billion industry, and a lot of the issues stems from that, but we'll get into that. So yeah. Maggie, let's talk about why sports is great. I played sports all through childhood, through high school competitively, in college. My wife did as well. We both played seriously post-college as well, although Britta is still competing in master swimming and still like dominating at a world level.
I mean, I saw this past weekend she got like second place. I've never seen her get second place. She always gets first.
Yeah, it was unusual.
I was concerned. I was like wanting to know if everything's okay at home.
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about Britta later in the episode, but her sports experience, I think, is what many parents think is more normal than it really is. And I'll share that story.
Yeah, like, I mean, I like that stat at the end of the Washington Post article about fewer than 7% of student athletes compete beyond high school. I'm not sure what the stat is, but I know it's less than 7% that actually get money to play. Like there's a lot of people that are able to play in college. I mean, I'm just going off my own experience back when I went to college and my friends that got scholarships versus didn't. A lot of people played in college. They didn't get a full ride or they didn't get any money.
Yeah.
And then there were some people that did get money, right? And so it's a huge gamble to think if you're investing this money because you think it's going to pay for college. That's the wrong reason, in my opinion, right? Doing it because I love sports for the same reason. Like everything you just said about, you and Britta, like I grew up playing sports and I wasn't even particularly good at any of them, but I was good enough to like make the teams and, be a part. You always smile when I say it wasn't good. I love that you sat the bench during high school. But I credit sports to a ton of my good friendships, a ton of just lessons I learned and things I learned in life and, follow through and commitment and grit and hustle and like all of those. So, I mean, I always have wanted my kids to play sports. I've never pushed them into it. But I've always like, in the back of my head been like, I hope you guys get into team sports eventually because team and or individual sports, because I think it's so good for you. And especially like I get so frustrated with how much time kids spend on screens. And it's a constant battle with our kids. And ever since we put this volleyball net up, I got people willingly putting their phones down and going outside to do something. Yeah. That's one of the top reasons I love sports.
Some of the other benefits of sports that I think we can all agree on: health and fitness, learning teamwork, the opportunity to practice and grow a skill, and then potentially finding and developing an expertise. Like sports might be your thing. And if you don't try, you're never going to find out.
Yeah. And then the last one, which I'll cover for you, Mike, is learning to win and lose gracefully.
It's an important
I know you
lesson.
Put in there for me. I joke about it. It's a huge lesson. It's where I grew my humility muscle, right? Like you grow a lot of humility not being the best at something around you. I actually think you learn way more than when you're the best at something.
Yeah.
In terms of just life skills.
Yeah. And, not to get too far down this rabbit hole, but, there's always talk about how kids today get medals for everything. And,
participation trophies.
Yeah, participation trophies. I think it is important to learn both to win and to lose. It is important to understand how great being successful is, but it is equally important to get your butt kicked in competition. And if you don't have both pretty regularly, I think it sets you up for weird stuff like weird expectations for what your life is going to be like down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I joked about Britta getting second place this last weekend at some event, but her post about it was what she needs to focus on and what she could do better. And I don't remember everything it said, but it was a humble post, right? Yeah. And it was, I don't know if that's what she said. She also slashed the
tires of the person who got first, but she didn't post about that.
I was going to say that might not have been what she said publicly, but.
So despite all these benefits, not everybody has such a wholesome experience. Many families can't even afford to participate. And those who can participate sometimes find it to be so competitive that it is stressful and deteriorates your quality of life. So the next excerpt is from an article that came from CBS News. The trend is being fueled by the growth in pay-to-play sports, which makes organized athletics prohibitively expensive for many households. Participation in sports among families earning less than $75,000 has dropped since 2011, according to the Aspen Institute's Project Play. By contrast, children from better-off families are participating in ever greater numbers. About 7 of 10 children from families that earn more than $100,000 play sports, compared with 3 in 10 from families earning less than $25,000. The typical American family spends about $700 per year on their child's sports activities, but some parents shell out as much as $35,000 annually to pay for lessons, camps, school sports fees, equipment, travel, and more. Even public schools are increasingly charging for sports due to budget cuts. This is one of the issues that you raised early on in this episode, Maggie.
That's a great point. Like, I think the fees we were paying at public schools, some of that goes to subsidize and augment coaches and other expenses that, the school's not paying for.
So let's talk about the cost of sports, Maggie. So the first point is that this is an industry, $15 billion industry, and it is one that leverages your desire to support your child. And there is a whole spectrum of this, obviously, and a lot of sports is very good, and well-meaning. A lot of this stuff, when that article mentioned $35,000 for all that sort of stuff, like that is a business. And so those people are in it to make money, and they are going to take advantage in some cases of your desire to want to do well for your kid.
Yeah. Hey, on that note, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, all these things are a business. And like, I believe that, many, or the majority, I would guess, are doing things for the right reasons. Like this volleyball club that we're joining, all the people that run it are former volleyball athletes, and all the coaches used to, have played volleyball their entire life, like in college, etc. And they're really committed to introducing the sport of volleyball to young girls and like getting them to love and learn this sport. But on the flip side, there's still like, when I sign up for everything, and I haven't yet experienced this in volleyball because we're not far enough into the process, but like when I sign up for swim team, there's a fee of what it costs. And then there's 20 add-ons that they try to sell you, right? You need to buy this year's sweatshirt, this year, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying none of that ever makes sense, right? But I would just remember that this is like all things in life, where there's like an initial upfront cost, and then there's like 10 things that are not, I don't even know if optional is the word, but to your discretion on how much you spend, right? Do you need 50 logoed items for the team, or do you need the team uniform and then you can leave it there?
Yeah. The one thing that really bothers me about competitive pay for play sports, and again, this is not all sports for kids, these organizations create a narrative around their activities that in order to be successful, your child must participate in a certain way, and that way has high costs. And that's ridiculous. The fact that, someone would say like, you will never be able to make that varsity team unless you do my pay for play, unless you do my camps and off-season team, that's not appropriate, bothers me to no end, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, I agree, Mike, but I think one of the problems is that so many people are participating in that their kids get a leg up, and it is a lot harder to get into playing competitively in high school and college if you aren't doing some of those off-season club teams. And so it's tough because you're right, the narrative is true. Like I could do, I could get my kid ready for the volleyball high school or middle school team or whatever, practicing in my front yard with me, though I, I'm not in any way have any professional training in volleyball. It won't be as good as the kids that are getting these professional coaches. And so it is tricky because I think you're right. It can be done other ways, but also don't you agree that like the level of competitiveness has increased since you and I were kids?
I don't know. I think that the coaching and the level of competition that you have in developing your abilities is worthwhile to some degree, but it is hard to like buy your way out of unathletic genes. Like what really matters,
agree.
What
Yes.
really matters is if you have an athletic ability, an inherent athletic ability, you will be successful at all of this stuff with much less work and cost than other people.
Yeah.
Now, if you are like on the cusp, spending a lot of money will get you to another level.
And we'll talk about that later. Like you got to, at some point, you got to kind of make some decisions based on where your kid is at. But.
Yeah. Well, I'll share this story right now, actually. So Britta is an extraordinary swimmer. Like I was a good lacrosse player. I was a very good lacrosse player, but Britta was an elite swimmer. And at 16, she was invited to go live and train at the Olympic Training Center in Germany because she was like, she needed that elite level coaching. And this was not like a, pay for play. This was a government funded thing. Yeah. To go, shave off half a second of her time so that she could go swim in the Olympics. And then when she decided she wanted to come to the US to swim, she kind of found 5 schools that she was interested in. And when she contacted them, they all offered her full cost of attendance scholarships, everything. She paid $0 in school. And then she selected University of Miami. That is the experience of an elite athlete. No, if she were not a good swimmer at age 16, just by natural ability, no amount of time or money would have gotten her to that point.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And back to that point of like, I don't know the exact percentage, except I just Googled it. NCAA so I know this is true. This is the recruiting facts. So I think they probably have to report this. About 2% of high school athletes are awarded some form of athletic scholarships to compete in college. So again, that 2%, some of that is people that get $1,000, which I know there's people who get like small amounts of money to go play at a smaller school. And then there's people like Britta who get a full ride.
Yeah.
Right. So if you, at some point, you got to have an honest discussion with yourself or in your head, not saying you need to have it with your really kid, right, about whether your child is in the 2%.
So let's talk a little bit more about a few more cost items. One is going to be that equipment can be expensive, but like everything, the quality only matters to some degree. Like if you're buying soccer cleats, you don't need to buy $300 soccer cleats. These $75 ones will work just fine.
Especially for a little kid whose feet
especially
grow,
for a little kid.
It doesn't even make, I had cleats, they don't even make it through a whole season. Their feet grow through it. Yeah. And I mean, on equipment, I'd say that's a great thing to try to pick up used on neighborhood groups and like eBay and other places, because again, you got just as many people who try to sport out, have some like, almost brand new stuff. And so another big cost can be traveling. So some of the examples that people gave of like a traveling hockey team and other things, it can exponentially increase the cost to participate and the time to participate. I know people where like on softball and hockey and a bunch of other people just I know in the neighborhood who like they spend every weekend driving their kids out to these like, kind of middle of nowhere, not a place they want to go to, right? Kind of middle of nowhere. And then they're, having to pay for a hotel, eating out all weekend, and just all these additional activities that are associated with it. And that can like just significantly increase what you think is the cost of a sport where you're like, oh, I have to pay, even on this volleyball, they very clearly state that all of the tournaments will be like within an hour drive at the most or in Atlanta, which I appreciate them saying. So I know, okay, I don't have a lot of travel costs on top of this $2,000, but there are a lot of sports where there's a lot of travel costs on there.
I don't think this is going to be like so far earth-shattering information for everybody. I think people understand this intuitively, that this is the situation and the solution is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think you're partially right, Mike, but I would say this is like a lot of the things we talk about that involve money where people don't really like spend the time breaking it down and thinking about it sometimes. They just think like, oh, well, they're not recognizing and doing the internal work to truly understand why they're doing the things they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And to have an honest discussion about like even that, 2% stat, right? To have an honest discussion. Sometimes people are just blindly being like, okay, this is what everybody else is doing. This is what my kids are doing. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it makes sense to do this stuff very thoughtfully and intentionally and like really think about it because it's expensive. And whatever you kind of start with your kids, it's hard to unwind sometimes, right? So you like be thoughtful about this stuff. It's okay. You're in charge. You're the parent.
And that's actually a great segue to my last article. This is again from the Washington Post. And Maggie, you said, be honest with yourself about your athletic abilities. This is going to be parents being honest with themselves about their motivations. Many parents derive their own self-worth from their child's achievements. Kids have become a reflection of their parents' identity, says Catherine Sanderson, a professor at Amherst College who is teaching a course on sports psychology. Their success in academics or sports is a tangible way for parents to measure their own success. If my kid is a winner, then I must be a winner too.
That's a great point.
Yes. Now, it is okay to be happy when your kid is successful. Be sad when your kid fails at something. But like anything, your identity, your self-worth is not what car you drive. It is not how good your kid is at soccer. Like it comes from other things. And so if you are pushing your kid and you are spending money and you are the driving force behind this because you are making it your identity, that's something that you should probably look pretty deeply on and see if it's the right decision for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so speaking of is it the right decision, let's kind of break down some thoughts on what we can all do about all of these really expensive kids sports situations that most people with kids will at some point find themselves in. And we're saying sports, but like this is activities, right? Yeah. It could be things that I'm not going to debate what's a sport and what's not a sport, but it could be that your kid is into pottery and pottery is really expensive, right? Like I'm serious, like getting them into like pottery classes where there's a wheel and like that's just as expensive, right? And so
D1 pottery scholarships, extremely rare.
But it is an activity, and so you can, take the same points we're making here and apply it to any activities your kids want to do. Okay, so I think one of the first points is that remember this isn't just about money, it's about time, right? So it's time for you, it's time for your child. So there is an opportunity cost, right? Make sure that you have enough time to fulfill other needs in your life and that and your other commitments your other kids have, and that it's the right thing for the time of your kids, right? And so one of the big discussions we've been having with our kids around volleyball is this is a time commitment. So I'm like, look, we are willing to, we make sure they know how expensive it is and that this is a big deal that we're investing this money, but I don't want them to get too hung up on the money. We're like, look, if you want to do this, we'll pay for it. But I want you to know what a time commitment this is. So I've been laying out scenarios with them and I'm like, one of my kids already is going to miss a friend's birthday party on Sunday because there's a 2.5 hour practice. And I'm like, look, we paid for this. It's not just the money, but we're committed to a team now. So you will have to put this before other things. Yeah, school's probably the only thing you don't put it before.
Yeah.
And so I was telling my 14-year-old, I'm like, hey, imagine a scenario where your friends have plans on a Saturday and you can't go because you have a volleyball tournament. So you need to be okay with that because I'm telling you now, the answer is going to be you have to go to your volleyball tournament. And so that's a time thing. I'll give you another example. So there's another volleyball club that we were looking at and it's like a 45-minute drive to get to where they practice, which is ridiculous in my opinion, right? Like that's really, because that's round trip. And then when it's that far away, you can't come home, right? Like when this place is 5 minutes away, I come home, I could do other stuff. I can run my kids other places. When I have to drive 45 minutes, I have to sit there. It's an hour and a half practice. I'm not going to, I got to sit there for an hour and a half and then wait and drive them home. It's a 3+ hour commitment for me and my kid now every time there's a practice. That's tough, right? And so I think it's just, you think of these examples and remember the time commitment that it puts on your entire family, your child, whoever's driving them, everything else. And just, again, be thoughtful and intentional about what you can and can't do.
And let your kids try things out. So push them to explore, but don't push them too hard to commit to very demanding sports regimens if they're not really into it. It's a great thing to learn how to play a bunch of different sports. But if your kid's 4 and you're already planning for them to go play soccer in the World Cup, like that's too early. Like they need some time to go find themselves and figure out what they enjoy.
Another thought is, if possible, you can lean towards less expensive and more accessible sports where there's a lot more kids playing, which often drives down the cost, right? When there's really high demand, it usually creates more competition. It kind of lowers the cost. There's certain sports or activities like equestrian.
Oh yeah, super expensive. Nobody's doing that. Yeah,
super expensive. You got to drive out to a place where there are horses. Horses are really expensive. So the cost of, just paying for lessons would be really high. Versus you want to play soccer, at least in our area, there's 20 different places I can drive, 3 miles and play on a soccer team. And less expensive. I grew up playing in a lot of church leagues. We didn't even go to the churches, but in our neighborhood, there were a number of churches that hosted really good sports programs. And they're not really in any way, I wouldn't say, they're affiliated with the churches, but they're not, like, you don't have to go to the church. You don't have to be a member. They're not expecting you to come to that church. The one thing I would say that I ever noticed, because where my kid still plays in the same one I used to play in when I was a kid, is they do a little prayer and kind of give a little talk for like literally 2 minutes right before the game, which I'm perfectly willing to sit through and or participate in for the fact that they're much less expensive, right? And they're not run to like make a big profit, which is why I appreciate. And I think they're doing it as a service to the community, which again is why I appreciate it.
Next piece of advice is consider just forgetting the idea that your kid is going to get a scholarship out of this. They are very limited, even at the highest level, and you are going to find yourself in a much lower stress environment if you just let your kid have fun. Like, it will become clear. My piece of advice to you, it will become clear early on that your kid is an elite athlete and has that potential. If you're like 17 and you're not getting calls from coaches every day, you're not going to get a scholarship.
I mean, you'll know about it before you're 17 too, right? Like there's not a lot of, magical like changes at the age of 17. I'll give an example. I know I keep using volleyball examples. It's been a big part of my life lately. We're playing, middle school volleyball and we're sitting at these games like every weekend. There's this one kid on the team, and there's probably multiple, but there's one in particular on this one team I'm talking about. And every time she serves, I'm like, that kid's not paying for college.
Yeah.
Nobody can hit her serves. Like she's amazing. And she's in sixth grade. So my point is like, you see that potential often even earlier than sixth grade, right? And so you'll have coaches, you'll have people telling you if your kids, actually I say that, but I'd be careful what coaches tell you, because there are some coaches who will tell you the wrong things back to like, this is an industry.
Your kid could go D1 if you participate in my club.
Yeah. Another thing that we talk about all the time outside of just this topic is just remember that you are the parent and ultimately you decide. So you've got to help your kids make informed decisions, create trade-offs with them on time and money. Like I love that example that a listener shared where at some point their parent said, hey, you can either do volleyball or tennis lessons. We're not doing both, right? And that's a time thing. That is probably a mix of a money and a time thing of like, you can't be running around in 50 directions and we don't want to spend this much money on it, right? You got to kind of pick something and commit. And I'm a huge proponent in having those like open, honest discussions with your kids. We've been having it around this whole volleyball thing, right? And I don't want to make my kids feel bad about it. And the second they seem like they're making a decision based on money, one of my kids did say something about that. And I said, the reason you don't do this, do not let it be about the money. But I just want you to understand that it costs this much, which means you're going to take it seriously. You're going to be committed to it, blah, blah, blah. But, and we did say, hey, you have to decide between like this or cross country and track because the seasons overlap. And you have to make a decision about one before you've tried the other, unfortunately. Right. And so, we're having these discussions, but like you're the parent. Ultimately, you decide. I know people who told their kids they can't play on this club team because it's too expensive. Like that's okay.
All right, Maggie. So let's hit our top 3 takeaways.
Hey, before we do that, I was just remembering, have you ever seen the picture of me on the front of Hoops magazine?
No.
We're going to unearth that. Hoops magazine is not a real magazine. When you take like photos in high school and they like put you on the cover of like fake things as part of your photo package. Mm-hmm. Photo packages, we didn't even get into all. That's all the like sort of extracurriculars and crap that, where they jack up the cost of things. But anyways, I'll unearth some, we'll have to share a lot of good old school kids sports photos of both of us.
That sounds
I don't know if I have any photos of me on the bench, but I'll see if I can find some. Okay. Yeah. Top 3 takeaways.
All right. Number 1, sports are an amazing way for kids to stay healthy and develop important life skills.
Love it. Number 2, pay for play sports are an industry, just like all other industries. And so thoughtfully scrutinize what you're being sold and be intentional about the decisions you're making.
And last point, maybe the most important point, whether your kid is good at sports or not does not make you a better or worse parent. So thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram.
All right. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.